When writing an argument essay thesis, there are 4 steps that need to be followed. The first step is to ensure that you fully understand the essay question. And one way to help ensure that this is true is to rewrite the essay question in different words. After this, the second step is to brainstorm some ideas for the essay. Often in an essay question, you're asked to agree with or disagree with something, or to support something or refute something. So in step number 2, you want to come up with some ideas for both sides of the argument. So we'll say both supporting and refuting. Okay, step 3. Now after you've done the brainstorming, step 3 is to decide on what style of essay you're going to write. Are you going to write an essay that supports what's been given in your question, or are you writing an essay that refutes it? So step number 3 is to decide the type of response to give. And finally, after you've done that, then you're finally ready to write your thesis. The thesis should always be written as a direct response to your essay question. So, as to ensure that there's no confusion when the reader reads your essay, they will know right from the beginning by reading your thesis what your opinion is on the question that you are given. Okay, so now that we know the steps that we need to follow to write an argument essay thesis, let's try a sample essay question together. So if we look at this question reads, "The government should be permitted to censor the internet to help protect young people from offensive content. Do you agree or disagree? Form an opinion and support it." So if we look at this question, now the question is asking us whether we feel that the internet should be something that is controlled by the government. Should the government be able to block certain content that it deems inappropriate? So now the first thing we want to do is we want to brainstorm some ideas that we could use to either support this statement or to refute it. So firstly, now to support the idea that the government should be permitted to censor the internet, one thing might be that the internet has a lot of adult content on it, and this type of content could, I think in most people's opinions, be harmful to children, to be harmful to young people. So we might make the argument that there's a tremendous amount of adult content on the internet, and that this is widely available to children, people. So that is one idea that supports the thought that the government should be able to control what people see on the internet. And if we thought some other ideas, but let's try to think of some on the refute side, which I think would be a little bit easier to come up with. So one thing could be that that if the government controls the internet, well, this restricts freedom of speech. So perhaps an idea that refutes this, that helps to support an essay that would refute this, would be censoring the internet restricts an individual's freedom of speech. Okay, another idea that would refute this would be that if perhaps the government controlled the content of the internet, this could slow the rate that information can be transferred. So this may lead, so the government controlling the internet may lead to a slower transfer of information. So for example, blocking certain news sites would mean users would not have as many outlets to receive news. So if the government is controlling the internet, well, that just means that certain websites would be blocked, and that means that there are less avenues for people to get information. So overall, perhaps this would slow the transfer of information. So that's another idea that could refute the concept of the government controlling what is on the internet, or what the people of its country can see on the internet. And perhaps a third thing would be that not everyone thinks the same things are offensive. So for one person, something might be totally offensive, and for another person, it might not be. So we'll just say what is offensive to one person may not be to another. Okay, so now we've looked at this question. We've come up with one idea that supports the idea that the government should be permitted to censor the internet, and we came up with three ideas that support refuting this statement. So as step 3 of our argument essay thesis writing step tells us, at this point we want to decide on what style of essay to write, and I think it's easy to see that to write a refuting essay would be much easier. So now we know we're going to write a refuting essay. What we need to do is now actually write the thesis. The thesis needs to be written as an exact response to the essay question. So this essay question reads, the government should be permitted to censor the internet to help protect young people from offensive content. Do you agree or disagree? Form an opinion and support it. So a thesis for this essay could be, it is not agreed that the government should be permitted to censor the internet, even in the pursuit of protecting young people from offensive content. Okay, so now if we look at this thesis, so basically what I've done is I've taken some specific words right out of the question and I reused them again, and this is a strategy that will be helpful to you, and it will be helpful to your essay reader, because they'll be able to clearly see the link between your essay question and what you're arguing. So firstly, if we just go through the question again, the government should be permitted to censor the internet to help protect young people from offensive content. Do you agree or disagree? Form an opinion and support it. And so when we go to write our essay, we would write as our thesis, it is not agreed that the government should be permitted to censor the internet, even in the pursuit of protecting young people from offensive content. Okay, so this thesis then directly answers the question given in our essay question. Now let's try another question. So if I remove this, oops. Okay. So this essay question reads, technology has made people even more antisocial. Do you agree? Now when we read this question, it's suggesting that because of computers, because of mobile phones, because of all forms of technology, people have stopped communicating as openly with others. And it's asking us to take a position on it. Do you agree? So the first thing we need to do is come up with some ideas that both support and refute this statement, and then look at them and see which one would be an easier stance to take in writing an essay. So some obvious things to support this would be the idea, I guess, that so people are now spending more time using their computer, more time on the internet, more time playing video games. So perhaps we could say the internet, video games, or the internet, video games, TV watching, etc., encourages people to spend their time in isolation. In isolation being alone. To spend their time in isolation interacting with a machine. So when we think of someone who's on the internet, maybe we imagine someone who is not necessarily communicating with people, but just sort of doing their own thing. So this idea would support the argument that technology has made people even more antisocial. Now, on the refute side of it, if we think about technology, well, in some ways, yes, it has caused people to spend more time in front of a computer, but it has also opened up a whole number of other avenues for people to communicate through. So something that would refute this argument perhaps would be these new technologies that have helped people to communicate. So we could say something like a lot of technology actually encourages people to interact with others. So, for example, like mobile phones, or Facebook, or networking websites like Facebook. So instead of being alone and experiencing technology by yourself and it forcing you to kind of retract from communicating with others, it is that, well, perhaps technology is actually encouraging people to interact with other people. Now, another side that could help us support a refute statement would be perhaps that technology has not made people more... technology has not made people less able to communicate with others, but just perhaps that they're communicating in different ways. So when it's not a traditional means of communication, for example, face-to-face, this is a new way to communicate with people. So perhaps people are not more antisocial, they are just communicating in different ways. So maybe as an example, so instead of meeting a person face to face, if you're in the office, instead of walking down the hall and meeting them, well, you're just going to send them an instant message instead. So instead of meeting face to face in the office, instant messaging can be used. So now we've come up with some ideas that support the idea that technology has made people even more antisocial, and some ideas that refute it. And when we look at this, we can see, well, we have two ideas that refute and one that supports. So I suppose that the easiest essay to write would be a refute essay. So now that we've decided to write a refute essay, well, then we take on the task of writing a thesis that directly responds to this essay question. It reads, technology has made people even more antisocial. Do you agree? Now, to refute this, we could write as our thesis, perhaps it is refuted that technology has made people even more antisocial. And as I pointed out in the essay question that we worked on before this one, if we look at this thesis directly answers our essay question. I've actually pulled words out of the essay question and put them into our thesis. So technology has made people even more antisocial. Do you agree? And then in our thesis we wrote, it is refuted that technology has made people even more antisocial. So when the essay reader reads our essay, they can directly our essay question. There is no confusion at all what point of view we are taking. So that concludes our short lesson on how to write an argument essay thesis. Thank you for listening.